In this video, I'm going to show you how to replace the gear case assembly on a DeWalt grinder. The gear case assembly is made up of the front gear housing, the gearing, the spindle, spindle bearing, and lock button. Typical reasons to replace this would be bad gears, a bad bearing, or a sheared off lock button. This is factory assembled and these other parts aren't available individually, so if you have a failure with any one of these parts, you'll need to replace the assembly. Replacing it is easy to do, and we're going to show you how. Gear case assemblies, along with many other parts, can be found on our website. Let's get started. We'll begin by removing the side handle and the guard. This will just make disassembly easier when we go to separate the gear case from the housing. Next, I'll separate the two halves of the rear housing. Next, I need to pull the brushes away from the armature. To do that, I'll pull the brush wires away from the holders, pull this tension spring out of the way, and then pull the brush arm back. And I'll repeat this on the other side. Now I need to remove the separator fan from the rear of the armature. It just simply screws on, but it is a reverse thread. And to remove it, I'll need to lock the motor from spinning. To do that, I'll just use the spindle lock up on the gear assembly. And now I can remove the fan. Next, I'll separate the gear case assembly from the motor housing. It's secured with 4 screws. Now I want to separate the armature from the gear case assembly. At this point, they're just connected by a bearing that's pressed into the gear case. So I'll just pull the two apart. Now I'll insert the pinion gear on the armature into our new gear case. As I do this, I want to line up these tabs on the bearing retainer with the slots in the gear case. I'll give it a tap with the mallet. Now I'll just apply a little new grease to the gears. Now I need to swap the cover from the old gear case to the new one. There's a gasket that goes between the cover and the gear case assembly. I want to inspect that gasket and replace it as necessary. And now I can go ahead and install the cover onto our new gear case. And now I'll just slide our armature and gear case assembly back into the motor housing. Now resecure the gear case with the 4 screws. Now I can reinstall the separator fan. Remember, it's a reverse thread. And again, I'll lock the motor from spinning using the spindle lock. Now I'll reposition the brushes back onto the armature. Reattach the brush wire. And repeat this on the other side. Now we'll replace our rear housings to the motor housing. And then I'll take a moment and make sure all the wires are tucked out of the way so nothing gets pinched when we put the other half on. Now we'll replace the lock button. This tab on the button needs to face towards the armature, followed by the paddle switch, and then the other half of the housing. As I do this, I want to make sure that the posts on the switch and on the lock button all line up properly with the housing. Once I get it in place, I'll just test everything real quick to make sure it's right. And that looks good. So now I can re-secure the screws. And now I'll reinstall the guard and the side handle.